sees what comes out of power stations in energy terms, and remember this is roughly to scale, is a very small thin line that goes to power our computers and our lights and our refrigeration. That's that small line there. And a big brown line which goes to heating the Latrobe Valley and the Hunter Valley. So we have an efficient machine for heating the Latrobe Valley in burning coal to make our power. And so that's quite interesting there. Metallurgical coal. What's that? Well, we all hear about this coal that we export to China so they can burn in their power plants. But if you actually look at the dollars and cents, we actually, by value, we import, the exports of coal are about making coking coal for making steel. So our big high value export at more than $17 billion is steel making coal. So it's nothing to do with power stations. In fact, thermal coal comes in third and it's roughly the same contribution as gold to our economy at around $7 billion. So that's an interesting thing. So the coal being used for steel making is a much bigger business than the coal for burning in power plants. In fact, that's only a third of the value we're getting with our exports. And about that burning coal in China, well, if you have a look at Japan, they're obviously burning a lot more because the red line, the purple line there, is Japanese coal for making electricity, and the blue line is their steel making. And if you look at China, who are actually the fifth biggest, because Germany's contained down here in Europe, user of our coal, they've got a 50-50 split between using a tiny bit in their power plants and using the rest for steel making. So in fact, they're quite self-sufficient in coal. So this idea that we're digging coal up and exporting to China is a myth. This idea that we're predominantly making our money on exporting coal for burning in power plants is also a myth. Most of the coal's being used for making steel. So what about China and India? Well, this diagram here shows you a historical contribution to the load of carbon in the atmosphere since 1950, but effectively since 1750, because most of it's occurred since 1950. And you can see that Australia is up at around 7.6 gigatons of CO2 till 2001, about 8 now. In the atmosphere, that's our historical contribution. Now, India, which has 1,100 million people, Australia has 20 million, in 2001 was up to 15.5, just on double what Australia was at. So if we're to point the finger at India, who had hardly done anything yet, then it's drawing a long bow there. So what we really need, in fact, their population's 55 times the difference, and we have put up each on a per capita basis, so for each per person, we've put up 380 tonnes each, while an Indian person's put up about 13 tonnes each. So just to recap on something that David Spratt mentioned, Dr. James Hansen from NASA, world's leading climate scientist, heads up the research group that advises the US government on climate change. And the new government, I think, will be listening. He says that at 450 parts per million, we're going to lose all the ice on the planet. We'll probably melt all the ice. And the effective message is there's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere already, so we need to stop carbon emissions to the atmosphere. So back in 1750, at 596 gigatons of carbon, we had probably a safe climate. It was in that blue band that David talked about. In 1950, we were pretty much at the limit of a safe climate, and that's at 300 parts per million. In 2008, we had 820 gigatons of carbon in our atmosphere, and that's where we are today. And we're building in several metres of sea level rise and a loss of Arctic sea ice cover. Now, if we go for the EU IPCC target, I haven't even bothered with the Garneau 550 parts per million target. We're looking at total deglaciation of the planet over a number of centuries, or at least several metres sea level rise, 5 metres sea level rise this by 2100. So we need to take 200 gigatons of carbon back out of the atmosphere, the carbon debt. That was the accrued carbon I talked about that Australia's put up and each country has put up to get back to a safe climate. So we need to go near zero carbon from human activities and draw down existing carbon debt, draw down existing carbon. So a new worldwide carbon debt mechanism or market It was raised at the 1992 Rio climate talks, and we actually need this target now. It was dismissed at the time. So Al Gore, he's on message. He got $300 million together and has created the We Can Solve It campaign, which is based on GetUp, and has also launched a website called Repower America. He says zero carbon electricity in 10 years, independence on foreign oil. So on 9th of November, he said, to begin an emergency rescue of human civilization from the imminent and rapidly growing threat posed by the climate crisis. Let's repower America with a commitment to producing 100% of our electricity from carbon-free sources within 10 years. So this is what his $300 million campaign is calling for. And Barack Obama seems to be listening. On the 15th of November, which was only a couple of days ago, he said, we must act right now. This was his address as part of the change program to come into the White House. Investing $150 billion to build an American green energy economy that will create 5 million new jobs while freeing our nation from the tyranny of foreign oil and saving our planet for our children. Within 10 years, save more oil than we currently import from the Middle East and Venezuela combined. And they talked about that being $700 billion a year that they're importing at the moment, and that's easily the budget to make this change. Joe Biden, who's the US Vice President-elect, he says if we're elected, we're going to have a first-class passenger rail system in this country. Joe Biden has commuted to work in Washington for 3 decades. So this is where the international move in energy and transport will likely be going, and Australia should be following the right track. Even Mercedes-Benz has a goal of removing fossil fuels from its lineup in under 6 years. So the latest global solutions. Okay, again, we've got to go near zero carbon from human activities, and then we've got to draw down existing carbon debt out of the atmosphere. So we need to move to zero, and that means not releasing those fossil fuels, the oil, coal and gas, and we've got to deal with debt. And to do that, we use the active carbon cycle. So the fossil fuels, oil and gas, they're the fixed fossil fuel store, and the oceans, atmosphere, forests, soils and vegetation are the active carbon cycle. So what we can do is we can capture released greenhouse gases to draw carbon out of the atmosphere by tweaking the soils, the forests and vegetation. And we can prevent the release of greenhouse gases from the safe fossil fuel store. So what we need is a wedges approach. And if anyone's here seen Al Gore's film, he's got a wedges approach, but unfortunately it's sponsored by BP. So his one has a big nuclear wedge, a big clean coal wedge, although, mind you, he's moved on from there and he's now saying clean coal is sort of imagination and it's not something that he sees being delivered. So he's given them the benefit of the doubt in the past, but not anymore. So we need a wedge of efficiency, maybe 30%, so that we effectively cap our electricity consumption where it is today. And wherever we find new needs for electricity, we save an equivalent amount at the same time each year. That's the new business. Instead of the business being build a power plant, we go and find an equivalent saving. Our electricity grid's big enough to allow us to do that with quite amount of flexibility. Wind power. In Al Gore's Repower America campaign, he talks about 37% wind power for the United States, and Australia has the most wind power per head of population available, the biggest wind resource per head of population. Solar power. In the Repower America plan, they talk about 13% solar power for the United States. We can do a lot more. And not only solar PV, which you may recognise as being the rooftop solar many people have on their houses, but large solar farms that include solar thermal technology for boiling water and then using that steam to drive a turbine. And transport. We need to move to electric drivetrains. So we need electric rail, that's trains, trams, light rail, and we need electric vehicles for anything we can't service with electric rail, and they're plug-in hybrid electric and pure electric vehicles. And the agriculture sector, we need to start valuing food based on what its land use is, what its water use is, what its resultant carbon emissions are. Avoided deforestation, that's a special category of stewardship where we need to allocate the money so that forests not only internationally are protected, but forests here in Australia are protected. And that means effectively lock up native forests, and any forest industry requirement is ecological restoration on the periphery of native forests and then selective